Welcome to another episode of Unlocking the Mind Behind Make More, Work Less. Hi, my name is Fong. I'm an entrepreneur, business strategist, real estate investor, speaker, and also a best-selling author. And every single day, I have the opportunity to help others unlock the potentials and guide them to succeed. Today on Unlocking the Mind, we look at another cognitive bias. And the reason why we do this is so that we better understand how our minds work. And so that we are able to prepare ourselves better or be able to make better decisions or be able to prevent ourselves from falling into cognitive traps or avoid it altogether. And today's cognitive bias is going to be called the distinction bias. This is where we're able to look at two options completely and find actual differences between the two when we're seeing them side by side versus seeing them on completely isolated scenarios. And this is a very, very common bias when it comes to buying certain products. For instance, buying TVs. When we go into a shop to buy TVs, we are bombarded with many, many options, with so many different TV screens all over the place. Now, because there's so many different TVs and all we can have to compare is our eyesight, we sit there and go, oh, this one's a little bit better. Oh, that one's a little bit better. Oh, no, this one's no good. So you kind of look at each one and try and find differences between them, and then pick the one that you feel is the best option or has the best quality picture. The thing is, they may be all very, very high quality TVs, and they may all be very, very good when you're just looking at them on this isolated scenario at home by yourself. And then you go, hey, because you have so many different options and you find one that looks a little bit better, just a tad a little bit better, you start to find reasons to justify why you need to pay a little bit more or a lot more for that TV. You go searching for the features and the options and the technical jargon as to why that TV is so much better. You may or may not even know what those technological terms are to begin with, but because once you see them side by side with all the other TVs and you go, no, this one's much better, you start to justify that's the reasoning why you're buying it. That's the reason why you're paying more for it. So there's always disadvantages or advantages when it comes to this bias, because when it comes to this scenario, you're actually paying a lot more for something you may or may not even need. You might be paying more for something you may or may not know even exists. Whereas if you went with the lower price item, it may be just as good because it's in an isolated situation when you take it home and you're watching it on your own or with your family. So that's the disadvantage of the distinction bias. Now, a good thing about distinction bias is that you're able to start looking for differences when it's very difficult to find differences. A good example of this is identical twins. It's very likely that you could tell two twins apart when they're standing side by side. You go, oh, there's a little bit of difference in their eyes, or there's a little bit of difference in the shape of their face, or there's a subtle difference when how they stand, or a subtle difference as to how they walk. But when they separate and they walk one way, another way, and they walk around and all kinds of stuff, all of a sudden you can't tell one from the other because they're in isolated scenarios. So in that case, the distinction bias is actually an advantage thing for you so that you are able to pick out subtle differences and make a better judgment when you do see two things together. That's why when you're presented with options, for instance, in a investment scenario, you want to look at two investment scenarios which may be completely the same from a high level point of view, but when you put them together, you're able to distinguish one over the other and which one's just slightly better because you're looking for differences. You're looking for different things that you can actually pinpoint to choose one over the other. That's why if you are looking at investments, you might want to ask them to give you a few different options, to give you a few different scenarios as to which investment is better or which investment is not as good compared to the other. And then the thing is, when you're looking at them all at the same time, you're able to make a better decision. Same with buying cars, same with making a house decision and all that kind of stuff too. So there was a test done when it came to how our brains function when we're looking at a whole bunch of options at the same time versus one after another. There was a test done to a group of individuals where they asked them, hey, how would you feel from a scale of 1 to 9 if you sold 0 copies of your book, 80 copies of your book, 160 copies of your book, or 240 copies of your book? After asking that questions with these 4 options, the results came in where they get high numbers for the 240. They got kind of mid-range numbers for the 160 units sold. But when it came to 0 and 80, it was kind of the lower range, 1 to 2 feeling of excitement and whatnot. However, if they were asked the same question and they go, how would you feel if you sold 80 units of your books? All of a sudden that number actually skyrockets a little bit more compared to the ones that they chose when there was all 4 options to begin with, because they would have felt fine if they sold 80 units. But when compared to 160 and 240 units, they don't feel as good anymore because there's better options out there, and that's distinction bias. So that's why distinction bias is so important when it comes to making decisions. You want to be able to use it for your advantage, and also to see how you are at a disadvantage if something comes up to you. So if there's options, try to look at more options to find out those subtle differences, but at the same time, evaluate all those options completely separately so that you can make the right decision and the right pick the right path forward. So until next time, today is the day to unlock your potential. That is distinction bias.